And so what's happened is that because they've taught everybody that we're a democracy, which is not true, now, so then in 1913, they bring the Federal Reserve System into being, right? And now you have this Federal Reserve System, which then in 1913 got the right to create money for the government, when before that the government created its own money. Now the government, when it needed money, had to borrow it from this private bank called the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank owned by individuals, incorporated in Delaware. And so what happens is, now the government borrows money from them to fund the government. Then the government says, well, we have to pay these people interest. How are we going to pay them interest? Let's impose a tax on the labor of the American people, which never existed before, to pay the interest to the bankers.
In fact, in 1980, Ronald Reagan said not one red cent of your income tax money goes to run the country. It all goes to the Federal Reserve.
Well, it was the Grace Commission report that said that not one nickel goes to the infrastructure of the country. You know.
I guess Reagan quoted that. Then.
Right. And so, but the point I'm trying to make is that by creating this Federal Reserve System, the government now became dependent on these private banks for money, and they started taxing us. You see, and so now what happens is that in '35, I believe it was, Social Security started, and they gave Social Security cards, said not to be used for identification, the Social Security number right on the card, right? And through Social Security, they started deducting money out of your paycheck. That was the first time they were ever could take money out of your paycheck, because people agreed to it because they thought it was going to their retirement fund. And so then when they instituted the income tax again, they started taking money out of your paycheck because Social Security could do it. And then they could do it again. You see what I'm saying?
And so now they've even taken control of the tax payment itself. I mean, literally like you're a slave. They're taking it right there when you make it.
Exactly.
They don't even trust the public enough to
send them a check. Yeah. Right. So they take it out automatically because they know people aren't going to want to pay it. So what's happened is that through the implementation of the Federal Reserve System, the government has become vested in these bankers, and they get their money from the bankers. And so then they impose a tax on us, which makes us more slaves, makes it more difficult for us to survive, right? Giving them more profits. And now what's happened is that through the Federal Reserve System, the bankers have pretty much taken control of our government. It doesn't matter Republican and Democrat anymore, because they're both the same. Neither one of them are talking about shutting down the Federal Reserve System or stopping the payment of taxes, you know, or any of the big issues that face Americans, right? So, I had a friend, Nick Rockefeller, okay, who was one of the Rockefeller family, and he, when I was running for governor in Nevada, he came to me, introduced himself to me through an attorney, and we became friends. We started talking about things. And I learned an awful lot from Mr. Rockefeller. And one of the things that we used to talk about was the ultimate plan of the banking industry, what they wanted to accomplish. And the goals of the banking industry, not just the Federal Reserve System, but the private banks in Germany and England, all over Italy, all over the world, they all work together. They're all central banks. And they're all part of the Communist Manifesto. You know, central banking is one of the major planks of the Communist Manifesto. We talk about America being a capitalistic country, but yet at the same time we have a central bank that plans everything for us, right? And the graduated income tax is another plank of the Communist Manifesto, right? So right there you have two major planks of the Communist Manifesto that have been brought in because of the Federal Reserve System, okay? So the ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, and they're doing it in sections. The European currency, the euro, and the European Constitution is one part of it. Now they're trying to do it in America with the North American Union, right? And they want to create a new currency called the Amero, right? And the whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. all money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is giving me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
And that chip's connected to a database that has your purchasing records, what you do, what
everything.
you sell.
Everything is in there, you know? And so they want a one world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control people. And you become a slave. You become a serf to these people. That's their goal. That's their intention. Nick and I discussed many things. One of the things we discussed, or he brought up in conversation, was reducing world population, and felt that there were too many people in the world. In a way, I agree. There are too many people in the world, but I don't think I have the authority to say who's going to die and who's not going to die, you know. But they felt that they wanted to reduce world population, and he felt that it should be reduced by half. He even mentioned to me once they were having a real problem trying to solve the Israel-Palestinian problem. And he talked to me once about they were playing with the idea of bringing Israel to Arizona, you know, and taking all the people from Israel and giving everybody $1 million and setting up Israel in the state of Arizona.
Unbelievable.
Just to end that problem, because that's a problem that they're not in charge of, in a sense. They're not controlling that problem. They're very arrogant. They can do whatever they want to do. We've given these people the authority to create money out of thin air, and through that device, they control everything. And if you want to win the battle to stop that, you have to deny them the ability to create money. It's only because they can make money that they have all this power.
They literally have the money machines.
They have the money machines. They can print it. They can do whatever they want to do. They own everything.
Aaron, we take over pretty quick. If we were the guys that issued the money, everybody had to come give us real assets for the use of this money we just printed up.
You know, people you know, I tell people, you know, why in the world does the American government borrow money from the banks when they have the ability to create it themselves without borrowing it and paying interest on it? Why? And nobody can answer that question. Not one politician ever raises that. Why does the American government borrow money when they can create it without paying interest?
Well, we did create it up until
1913. And so people say, well, because if the American government does it, it'll create inflation. That's the answer. I say, well, let's look at it. The American government has the Federal Reserve do it, which creates the same inflation as if they did it. But also with the inflation, now you're getting massive debt. So with the Federal Reserve, you have inflation and debt. Now, if the American government made the money, backed by gold, which limited the amount they could make, you wouldn't have debt and you wouldn't have inflation.
But inflation was only about 50% from the 1780s, I looked it up, until the late 1800s. And then we have the central banks already trying to cause some panics, which they then used to push the Federal Reserve. And if we look at inflation since 1913 into 2007, it's exponential. In fact, $1 is worth about 2 pennies what it was worth in 1913. Federal Reserve Chairman, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, doubled the money supply from 2000 to 2006. And then Edward Bernanke, the new Fed chief, came in and said he's going to double it again in the next 2 years. And then he said, now I'm going to make the money supply numbers secret. And so now we don't even know.
Right.
But the evidence is they are just, I mean, in the curve of inflation, it gradually grows. And then suddenly at a point, it goes straight up. And it seems we've
It's
now...
parabolic, yeah.
Yeah, parabolic.
But the thing is that the only thing I disagree with you on from early 1800 to 1913, there was no inflation other than during the Civil War. You know, when Lincoln was
Well, I'm
printing
talking about
it.
how much a dollar was worth, and I know.
Never changed. There was no inflation. In that whole 100 years, there was no inflation. People knew what the money was worth. They could retire. They knew what it would cost them to live their lives out. There was no problem. It was only since 1913 when the Fed came in that we created massive inflation and massive debt.
So then what you said earlier, then there really wasn't inflation.
There was no
So
inflation.
you don't get inflation when the government issues the money, at least in the U.S. history.
Not if it's backed by gold.
Well, exactly, but I'm talking about, and I did look this up, and I believe that if you look after the country was set up, and some of the things that happened with Andrew Jackson and the rest of it, there were points where it spiked and there were manipulations.
There were points, mostly during the Civil War.
Yeah, and that's because Lincoln printed so much money.
Exactly. That's right. But once that ended, but basically there was no inflation other than that during that short period of time. I mean, a loaf of bread was a loaf. Of course, the same thing. People could plan their lives. Today, they plan inflation. Now you have two parents working. They can't afford to pay for their family anymore. The kids are going to state-run schools now. The kids are being indoctrinated how to think. They're being given Ritalin. They're being given all these drugs. The whole country's being dumbed down. It's all because of the Federal Reserve System. And the Federal Reserve System and these bankers are responsible for the demise of America. And if we ever want to win this battle, you must shut down the Federal Reserve System. And we must shut down these bankers and restore sound money to this country.
Will you talk a little bit about some of the families that own the private Federal Reserve, the stock in it? And I mean, obviously, you say you're not a big expert on Bilderberg Group, but you talk about how it's the same system worldwide. It is the same families. They meet and kind of set the policy each year, and then it goes to the Royal Institute of International Affairs in England, it goes to the CFR in the U.S., and then these are their management bodies where they wield control, really the de facto Congresses over the nation. So, I mean, I would like for you to speak some about the families that own and run the Federal Reserve, and if you can't connect it into these other international bodies.
Well, I can't speak to those families because I can only speak about, you know, what I know for fact. Everything else is speculation, and I don't like to speculate. You know, I know about Rockefeller because I was friends with him. We talked about it, and I can tell you firsthand.
What did Rockefeller tell you about the Federal Reserve and their family owning part of it?
Well, he said the New York Fed is the main controlling interest of the Federal Reserve System. They control the bulk of it. So the New York Fed is really the Federal Reserve System. Even though there's 12 different banks, it's run by the New York Fed. And the New York Fed is basically the Federal Reserve System. So who's ever running the New York Fed is where, and the families that control it, control the New York Fed. And they're the main engine behind the Federal Reserve System.
And that's a wing of the Bank of England.
Well, the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve are partners, you know, and the Bank of England is a private bank, and so is the Bundesbank in Germany, and the Bank of all the banks of the G8 countries are all private banks. They're private central banks. And look, what happened in Europe? Didn't Europe vote down the European Constitution?
Yes.
They're still doing it. Didn't they vote down the euro? They're still doing it. They don't care what the people vote. They do whatever they want to do. What we want doesn't matter anymore. It's their agenda, it's their plans that matter.
Isn't that prima facie evidence of a tyranny?
Well, there's no question we're in tyranny. There's no question we're living in a world where the American citizen is no longer a free individual human being to do the things that they wish to do. You know, we're slaves, and it's getting worse.
What do we got to do to bring these people down?
In my opinion, you must shut down the Federal Reserve System. And I think that there has to be an uprising. There has to be an uprising. People have to stand up. I can't do it alone. You can't do it alone, Alex. And we need to get a majority of people, not a majority of people, but
It was 5% won the war against the British, a highly motivated group. But I agree, people have got to get angry first. I mean, not just, yeah, we know it's corrupt and that lackadaisical. We got to get pissed.
people don't seem to have the courage to do what they have to do, you know?